Things are going to start happening to me now.
I think Tyler is amazing.
And I'm a fan of this show. I've watched several episodes.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. You stink, Tyler.
Never promise crazy a baby.
Oh, I like that. That's a cool idea.
Are either of you homosexuals?
I go both ways. What do you think?
You mean like flaming or?
No, we're not homosexual, but we are willing to learn.
But I do wonder, for others, in other cases, whether libertarianism today is just an excuse. Many on the right to act selfishly.
Look at me. And then some fat asses in Washington started having opinions. The Olympic Committee started having opinions. You bitch, I know you. You started writing your opinions.
And it just makes me wonder, you're dead, bitch. You know, why are you doing this to this poor guy?
I don't care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you. That
It's Tyler. It's an emergency broadcast, everybody, of LPR. We're going back to our roots. We're going to do a podcast review. I don't know if you've seen things blowing up on the internet. I checked something yesterday. Dave Smith. I'm going to go back to Dave Smith. I'm going to do a little defense of Dave Smith. It's a podcast called The Remnant with Jonah Goldberg, a good old school conservative, kind of a anti-Trump guy now, maybe the Lincoln Project stuff. He's with the Dispatch, and he had on Michael Moynihan, and they had a good podcast. Some of it's good, and then some of it's horrible, and so I thought I would just break it down real quick and play some clips. JC's in the chat. Welcome, JC. Hope everyone out there is able to see everything going on. What I'm going to do here real quick, I'm just going to make sure all the other streams are going. I think Rumble's up. We'll pop out the chat for them. That's good. I think we're also up on X. Let me just double check. Yep, we're good there as well. And I want to pop out the chat in case anybody on X. This is just how I have to do it. Just how I have to do it here. Okay. We're going to do this maybe about... Oh, hang on. It's making noise there. Okay. All right. Everything's streaming fine. I've got... There we go. I think I'm ready to go. One thing I did not do. There's always something to do. And so let's just set up my browser here real quick to be able to see who I need to see. The clips, and then we'll get right to it. Sorry. Do you want to save the what's going on? Okay, there we go. Video capture. I thought I had everything ready to go. Brave browser. That's just all we want. Okay, I think we're almost there. Almost there, people. Pardon me. I thought I was ready, and I guess I wasn't quite. But now we will be ready to go. Dun, dun, dun. There we go. And one more browser to take care of here. Pardon this. This was going to be all professional, and as always, there's always a problem. Okay. All right. I think we're almost there. I have to size it down. Okay. Good to go, I believe. Okay. So look, we're going to transition this way. We're going to transition this way, and I think everybody is good to go. Okay, so I think I'm going to introduce this real quick. Michael Moynihan, Jonah Goldberg. Michael Moynihan is part of We the Fifth Column podcast. He wrote for Reason magazine for quite some time, libertarian guy. If you watch, and you're going to see some of this clip in here, he knows everything. And when I mean everything, I mean he will call out names. He will name drop stuff, references that are outrageous, and I mean that in an amazing way. He's able to go very, very deep. So if if there's a common person out there and he makes a claim that he doesn't know who they are, I'm not believing it. Okay, and that's kind of the thing here. So he's with We the Fifth. Like I said, he did stuff for Vice. He's a very smart guy, and Jonah Goldberg. Kind of your neocon type now, Meghan McCain, think of that kind of thing. And I think they're both in a sense. And then when I say like anti-Semitism by another means, maybe I should really say it a different way here, which is it's all anti-Semitism, which you block someone, right? You don't want to talk about their topics. So what you call them is an anti-Semite. You call them a Nazi. They even reference those kind of tactics in here. And when you do that, then you don't have to actually have any conversation with these people about anything. You don't have to push back against their stuff. So, but anti-Semitism, that's kind of what the woke thing does, is calling you names all the time. So they can't always do that. So there's other tactics that you can do that are in place of anti-Semitism, and I think they employ those here. So what we're going to start out from here is what actually took place. How did this controversy come about? Let's play that first. Here is the clip that kind of got all this brought to my attention. Take it away.
Comes from foreign policy, actually, because Sohrab was a very dedicated neocon. He was a very dedicated, regime change in Iran, where I think he was either born or his parents were born. He might actually have been born in Iran. And he is abandoned that. And look, you see libertarians, there's a completely batty school of libertarians who seem to have taken over the kind of mantle of libertarianism. You see this comedian guy who's always, I can't remember his name, who's always talking on Twitter, and they never talk about economics. I've never heard them talk about economics. It's just not even an issue. It's all about foreign policy. It's all about Israel. They're literally more interested in having conversations about how bad Churchill was than they are about, our trade barriers net positive for the American worker, right? Yeah. I mean, these are interesting conversations that I think they're actually really like real conversations to be had. I mean, David Otter at MIT wrote that thing about, there is a problem with free trade and what, the opening of China has done to the...
Okay, we'll stop there. And I'm not going to completely, break down every little thing, but... what you need to understand there is he's talking about Dave Smith. Now, Dave Smith, he knows who Dave Smith is. If you've listened to the Fifth Column podcast, he's referenced him multiple times. Dave Smith has been on, okay, so that's the start. That's the start where we're going here, okay? Dave Smith has been on Rogan a bunch, very prominent things. And if you think Dave Smith, and you can like him for whatever you want, thinking that Dave doesn't talk about economics is ridiculous. So first thing you say, yes, Minder, it is live. First thing you say is he never talks about, and these libertarians never talk about economics. Well, first of all, Israel is a big thing in the news recently, right? For the last year, well, since October 7 of 23. So it's been a big deal. It's been a big, topic, and Dave's taken it on. So that's a thing that he's getting to talk about. Okay, so let's go. So that's the main thing. So let's just look here. Here's a tweet that Dave said. This is what got me to actually look at it. He's like, listening to Moynihan trash me on Jonah's Dispatch podcast is hilarious. He calls me batty, claims he can't remember my name. It is a very difficult one. And his first criticism is that I don't ever talk about economics. Imagine claiming that you can't remember someone's name and then criticizing them for what they don't talk about. If you don't know enough about someone to remember the name Dave, maybe you're not an expert on what subjects they're interested in. What could be better than that? Exactly. And I'm just going to go through here because there's some other things. Then Jonah at one point comes back and he's like, oh, because Dave then said, update, I've cringed my way through another 10 minutes of this. Jonah Dispatch and Moynihan talking about me and Scott Horton like a 40-year-old virgin describing boobs. It's fine if you're not at all familiar with us, but stop pretending. Happy to discuss with either or both of you. Okay, Jonah comes back here and says, I have so little idea of who you are. I don't even remember talking about you. Sorry, dude. Didn't mean it as an insult. Still don't. Okay, that's problematic in a few ways, right? And the reason being is because here's a video. Okay, let's I actually have it here. Let me move this here, and then I will get to. I'm gonna play that later. So those are the two things we had going on here. Okay. Here now does Dave talk about economics? I'm just going to put this up real quick. This was him recently on Matt Taibbi's podcast. Now, if you listen to his own podcast, there's economics going in there all the time. Okay, so here's something here.
Al-Qaeda is on our side. But listen, since you raise it, I mean, not that we want to get into a big debate, but why not believe in welfare? I mean, that's where see. I find myself, I'm in lockstep with the libertarians on all these foreign policy issues. And I rely, Scott Horton, for example, I've learned so much from him on foreign policy stuff. I listened to a show, I've read his books, and I've listened to your interviews with him. So it's just so fascinating. Like, couldn't agree more for it. But then on the issue like wealth, I mean, why not provide a struggling person with maybe disabilities or children and obstacles in life, abuse, who knows? Why not provide them with some support so they can, be on their feet and have the minimum, like the basics they need to survive? That's,
Sure. I get the question completely. And like, okay,
I'm not going to play Dave. I'm just pointing this out. This was just 11 days ago. And if I scroll up here, 52,000 views. Okay. It's on Matt Taibbi's podcast, and Dave went on there and he talks 52,000 views on this video alone, talking about welfare, and he doesn't shy away from it in the least. Okay, so he's goes on there. Now, where else has he talked about politics? Recently, he was on Theo Vaughn's podcast, a huge podcast. Trump was on this.
What about the Federal Reserve? What is it, and is it f***ing us?
The Federal Reserve is the central bank. It's technically not even a part of the government. It's the worst of the government and the worst of not the government, right? So it was created by an act of Congress in 1913.
Okay.
It's the head of the Federal Reserve is appointed by the president. So it's, in that sense, very much a part of the government.
Okay.
However,
okay, talking about it there. Let's go to, now I've got, okay. Another one.
It's on gold or not?
No, we haven't been on gold for many years. It was in 1973 or 71, was it? Nixon suspended the gold standard, and we've never been back on it since then.
So our currency was actually backed by an actual gold.
The idea was that you could, for every dollar you printed, you had to put away a certain amount of gold. So what I was talking about before, after World War.
Okay, I'm not going to go deep into this one, but I want to look at Theo Vaughn's podcast, okay? So those are his shorts that he did. Now, he did a podcast here with Dave Smith, almost 1 million views, okay? Past Speak On with Dave Smith, almost 1 million views. He talked about, as a matter of fact, those are the two shorts that Theo Vaughn puts out for this podcast, 2 of them specifically related to economics, okay? So, once again, now these are blowing up much bigger than the Remnant. So first of all, it's a lie. When Michael, and I'm going to break this, I'm going to go a little further here. So because I think it's important, Michael Moynihan, I'm a big fan of his. This guy, and someone just put in here, Max just said, oh, looks like the guy had a North Korean or best Korean propaganda poster behind him. Kim Jong-un would approve. I will, yes. Now I will say this about Moynihan, and I'm gonna go back now and play some of these clips so you get some, because there's other contradictions in here, and I don't want to trash them completely because there's cringe moments like that. Michael Moynihan is known for a few things. Okay, specifically, he's known for outing people that did plagiarism, wrote books, plagiarized portions, and he finds these just teeny tiny bits of info and relates it that it's a plagiar. And he's outed 2 big people. I don't remember their names because can't recall things quite like him. So my point is, when he does research, it's exceptional. Now, also you go back here with this podcast, and if you know him at all, he is a student of the Cold War. So maybe we'll get to that. Let's play this. Actually, before we do that, because I wanted to, which one was this? We got Dave there, Federal Reserve, those ones. So this was a little thing I compiled here, and let's play this one up here.
And you knew Bill Buckley, and I met Bill Buckley one time, and I was enormously impressed by him just that one time that I met him, and he was very sweet and generous with his time on the street, by the way. And we had a lovely conversation. And to hear Tucker Carlson, somebody I know, and like I used to have an enormous amount of admiration for, because he was a very good magazine journalist. People tend to forget that. And for him to say, like, all the problems of the 20th century, you can kind of trace back to Bill Buckley. I mean, I'm sure you heard him say that. And I was where have we gone that this is, we're not talking about Albert J. Nock here. We're not going deep. We're just talking about Buckley.
Accelerating. It's look, and again, just like you said, I'll disclaimer as well. I'm talking about people who I don't necessarily like. Like, I view Bill Buckley as one of like the great villains of the 20th century. I think he ruined.
I couldn't agree more.
Yes, but
and you knew Bill.
Okay, so one. They remembered that in the little corner up here when he mentions that Michael Moynihan, you can see just a little bit up here, Jonah Goldberg's in whatever system they're using, probably Skype. He says, yeah, I remember him saying that. Now, he didn't say that being Tucker. Dave said it. This was a big thing around the internet, and it's on Dave's show, and Dave is the one that said it, and Tucker just agrees. So now you come and you go, dude, I don't even know who you are. Oh, I remember that comment Tucker said on some person's show that's been on Rogan like maybe 10 times more than you both. Okay. So I don't know if you think that you are so much more important and that your sphere doesn't go out. Maybe it's not. Maybe you haven't ventured out enough and you're in politics. You know all these things. Your Fifth Column podcast is more specific, Moynihan's, about, pontificators, people in the news, that kind of thing. You don't think you would know who Dave Smith is, who's been on Fox News a ton, who was on CNN a ton. Okay, now is going on these big shows. To act like you don't know who he is, that, though, is my point. You can't just say Dave is anti-Semitic, because we'll get into some other things here. You can't say Dave's anti-Semitic because he's a Jew. He's either a self-hating Jew, but that doesn't really work because you need to be more high-minded and above that. So what you do is you just say, I don't even know who this guy is. And if I don't know who he is, then his opinion shouldn't be listened to. You shouldn't listen to his opinions because I don't even know. He's just a comedian, right? Perhaps. And by the way, you can like Dave, you can not like Dave. That's not here or there. My point on more of this is about trying to dead name in a sense, or do this where you just dismiss them out of hand. Call them the Nazi. It's a little more subtle than calling them the Nazi, because you can't call everyone a Nazi. They try, and they do some good work here about like why this should not be the case, why you should not be calling people necessarily a Nazi. Now, we have some contradictions that they make. So I think we'll go into this one. Let's see, which one is, I hope I didn't fuck up on all my my points here. This is 37 minutes in. Boy, Tyler, if you fuck this up, you have hell to pay. Let's just try this one and see what this one says here.
Right on red, I'll get a ticket. Yet these people on the little motorized bikes that have no plates on them going through red lights, and you feel a sense of breakdown. In that horseshoe theory thing, it's not like I don't think that there's people that are like, moving ideologically. Of course they are, but I think it's just a confrontation with reality finally. That we live in these worlds in the Upper East Side. We don't really have to see it, but now you really do. Because everywhere you go in New York City, you see a very different city than 15 years ago. It just feels different. And everyone can talk about the numbers, and they can talk about crime stats, et cetera. Yeah, it's not 1993. The worst year for murders in like New York history. But that's a weird comparison. It's a weird point of comparison. So I think there is certainly, that kind of shift. And also,
okay, I have no clue why I clipped that one out, but I have so many different ones going here. 114. Okay, I think here's the problem. I needed to do it at 5 minutes. So let's go back here. We're gonna go in here now. This is some of the contradictions that you're gonna get, and I didn't go to the whole issue with all the clips on this show, which are who are these people? Now they talk about schooling for their kids. They both live in New York, and I think this permeates some of the mentality here, which is kind of the elite. Okay, they're in that thing. They're talking about private schools for their kids in New York. It can't be cheap. I don't know what they do for a living, but that's the circles that they run in. Now, I will say this: Moynihan does go out and he does interviews all around the country, so he gets a little bit more understanding of everyone type of thing. But there is something, this mentality of, I think, elitism that holds within there. Okay, let's start this first one. Contradictions about Moynihan. And yes, he has these posters here, but he is, and he'll explain it here.
I can't get over the Cold War. It's so in my, it's like seeped into my pores. And I can't, conservatives who make excuses for the Russians and for Putin. I mean, it's just bizarre to me that we've had this habit on kind of the right side of the ledger of just not trusting the communists, not trusting the Ruskies. Matt Welch is just like this too.
Yeah.
It's like, don't trust the Russians. But I've noticed this kind of weird shift that nobody cares about that anymore. And it's not that we should be stuck in the past, but there's just a lot of great lessons to be learned from it. And people seem to, I'll tell you one final thing. I know that because you worked at National Review for a long time and you knew Bill Buckley. And I met Bill Buckley.
Okay. And then that's where we played that clip. So yes, lessons should be learned about the past, and especially with this Cold War stuff. Now, Michael Malice came out with his book, Do I have it over here? I have it somewhere. The White Pill. Okay, and it's all about the fall of the Soviet Empire. You know, Mike Amalis had been back there, and I tweeted, I'm like, I think the person to talk to him, because there's one person that I think is really good on a lot of this stuff. One is actually Jonah Goldberg, but the other one is Michael Moynihan. Very, very good, as he just indicated here. You should know about this stuff about the Cold War, and I'm like, hey, why you should interview Malice on this stuff. And they don't like each other. Matter of fact, Moynihan, I don't think he would ever have him on his podcast. I mean, it just won't happen. And they both responded there. Malice is kind of like, yeah, why not? And Moynihan was kind of like, yeah, go fuck yourself. So, it's it's those kind of things. Okay, so remember, and this is where we're going to have some issues here. And I will get to some of your comments. So, you should be remembering a lot of this stuff because, the wars and whatnot, because you learn from them, right? And of course, so what is the concept a little bit later? This is, an hour later in the show when they're talking about neocons.
I'm sure you've been called a neocon a billion times and, worked at NR during the Iraq war days, et cetera. I just don't understand. I mean, I have some theories, but I don't understand why the neoconservatism has just remained this punching bag, that this is what destroyed conservatism, and we're bringing it back by being more socialist, but when we talk about neocons, we talk about Iraq. It's a very confused kind of jumble of ideas.
So we're an hour and 15 minutes into this, you've just picked the one topic.
What Matt Welch calls the French goodbye. Yeah, it's another opera. It's the Wagner opera. We've become the Nibelungen right now.
I literally could just reach for the jerry can of gasoline on the floor right now, turn it up over my head and set myself on fire for 45 minutes here. In fact, I just talked to Pod about this on yesterday's episode. Like, I think people get neoconservatism completely wrong. It drives me crazy. It's something that I hold receipts on, like very few people do. And I don't think it was primarily about foreign policy. That was second wave neoconservatism. It got called neoconservatism by its enemies, and it's kind of stuck. Yeah. The Bush administration was not full of neocons. Like, Dick Cheney wasn't a neocon.
John Bolton's not a neocon. No.
John Bolton's not a neocon, right? No. There's a group of conservatives we can call hawks that have always been vastly more hawkish on foreign policy than the neocons. Like rollback was a position that the neocons disagreed with, right? Correct. Neocons were on containment and cultural stuff, and Curtis LeMay was talking about, like, we have to get over our unnatural aversion to nuclear bombs,
And we should have intervened in Hungary in 1956, etc.
It's a whole other. So, like, people just don't know what they're talking about, and I can get kind of worked up about it in all sorts of ways. But I particularly, coming out of this last election cycle, where we heard Vivek and Vance and all of these people talk about neocons as warmongers and how Liz Cheney just wants to get more American kids to die in a war, yada yada yada, and then they're all like, take back the Panama Canal? Hell yeah. Won't rule out force to get Greenland? You go. It's like, wait a second. There's not a neocon out there that would. Anyway, so, like, it's very difficult for me. I don't like saying everybody's an anti-Semite, right? Yeah. And even though there's obviously some anti-Semitism to it, because even though a lot of neocons aren't Jewish and weren't Jewish, and even some of the quote unquote neocons that these people hate, like Bush and Cheney and Liz Cheney, aren't Jewish, there is still something about the Jewish association that drives these people nuts. Yeah. Or at least some of them, not all of them by any stretch. But the reason why it's sort of unavoidable to talk about the anti-Semitism, at least in part, is that it's so irrational and it's so difficult to come up with a better explanation for it. Yeah. The only other explanation I can have for it is, other than ignorance, right? And there's a lot of ignorance out there. People are told this. I think neocon has become. There's an irony. Neocon, there's a lot of argument about where the term originated, and a lot of people claim credit for it and all that kind of stuff. But the standard history says that Michael Harrington came up with it to describe his old friends who used to be socialists who moved right. Yeah. And so it was always meant on the left. Basically, it was Marty Lipset used to say that the neo in it was a deliberate invocation of neo-Nazi.
Okay. By the way, I do encourage you to watch this. It's interesting. And both very, very intelligent people. Jonah wrote a book called Liberal Fascism, which we're going to kind of get a little bit of that in here as well. Very smart people. As you can tell, they can recall and recite details, dates, bam, bam, bam. But I can't remember this comedian. I don't remember that's on. I mean, this episode, 3.7 thousand views. That I'm watching here. Now, the podcast feed might be a lot more. We just saw Dave was on Theo Vaughn is almost reaching 1 million just on YouTube. I don't know if they. I mean, come on. At some point, they're trying to make it look like Dave. We don't know who you are. Sorry, buddy. Come on. Let's back this up. Things have changed since 2010 here, guys. Now look at him. It's you don't agree with me on bombing these places. Therefore, the only explanation is you must be anti-Semitic. I mean, I'm trying not to say that you're anti-Semitic, but what else are we going to say? You don't want to go to war for this. The Iraq war, Iran is a big deal. I don't know why. I don't know. Other than you might be anti-Semitic. It's a little bit pathetic for that. Okay. I thought this just came out yesterday. It's Tucker Carlson, and he was talking to this guy, Kurt Mills, who I've known about only because a very good friend of mine has a very exact similar name. And he's like, I get confused with this other Kurt Mills. And so I'm like, who? And then I found him and I was like, oh, you guys have completely different ideologies. But anyway, they talk a little bit about
technology to China. Yeah. I do think so the backbone of support for these wars has been evangelicals. Let's just be blunt about it. It's everyone, beats up on the neocons or whatever, these fervent intellectuals in Washington. But really, the foot soldiers of this have been Fox News viewers who are not ideological. They're not intellectuals. They're just normal American, patriotic, heavily evangelical people. And the truth is, I think a lot of them are beginning to recognize that their religion does not support this at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really clear. Genesis 6, why do we have the flood? Why does God kill everything on earth? All the people except Noah and his family, all the animals except the ones in the ark. Why does he do that? He spells it right out because they're committing violence. That's why. So it's like the idea that, the Iraq war breaks out and all these preachers are like, no, really, we have to fight Islam and kill all these people and that's what God wants. That's not what it says at all. And there's no mention of any specific secular government in the New Testament. Sorry, guys. And I think a lot of Christians are beginning to realize this. It doesn't, because you're a Christian doesn't mean you have a specific political agenda at all, I don't think.
Yeah.
But if your political agenda is like violence, that's prohibited. Sorry. And it could not be clear. It's on every freaking page. So I don't know, the deception involved in this was just like mind-boggling that these preachers could get up on Fox News and tell you that killing people is what Jesus wants. No, it's not true. And I just feel among people I know a growing recognition of that. And I think it's a huge problem for the war lobby, which has used these people as its supporters. And you see it in the Congress. I'm an evangelical and I'm for another war with somebody. No, you can't do that anymore.
I'm hoping people are zoned out.
You do think that?
I think that they're hoping the country's old, tired, zoned out, can't oppose it. And they're hoping that these initiatives can be achieved piecemeal. Start by bombing Iran here, et cetera, maybe the government will collapse, et cetera.
To be replaced by what? The same people who replaced Assad and Gaddafi and Saddam and the Taliban.
I think, to take the other side, the Assad thing that's like pretty close to the best case scenario of how that could have gone. I think in Iran, it would go way, way, way worse. It's a much bigger country.
It's hard to know. You're rolling the dice. You start killing people and things go sideways. Like you think
it's pretty close to.
Okay, I'm stopping it there. Once again, I'm giving you some clips here. And the important part of what I want to talk about there is they specifically talk about neocons. There's a lot of ripping of Tucker Carlson in this, in the Remnant podcast. And we'll play it here. Holocaust denial. He's, anti-Semitism. That one, Tucker is blaming the Christians, okay? Are you going to now say, he's anti-Christian, okay? Sometimes you can just point out things that are true, and it doesn't mean that you hate a group. And even if you do, big fucking deal, okay? So I thought that was an interesting thing. And by the way, neocon can change. The definition of neocon has kind of morphed. He's like, people are misunderstanding what it means. Okay, buddy. It's changed to the point now, it just basically means war hawk. Okay, it doesn't mean Jew. And yes, the original meaning, which he talks about here, I didn't get into, is it was those, we just started to talk about it. As he explains it, it's those that were on the left and then they moved over to the right and they were heretics. They call them neocons, which means new in Europe, neo. But he's like, hey, it's kind of the neo-Nazis. So we're saying that it could be because they're heretics. And they, they were actually the Trotskyites that now moved over and were no longer. Anyway, that kind of thing. Perhaps, but you know what? The definition morphs. And when you still abide by the idea of what the originals are, and now things changed a little bit, conservative isn't what it used to be, libertarians can change. You want to hold on strong to this old definition, go ahead. But don't, you can wax poetic about, you guys don't understand what an original. Okay, it's like trying to call yourself a classical. I'm going to call myself a liberal because liberal actually meant, Bastiat said, okay, good luck. It's just you're not going to change the nature of this anymore. Okay, let's move on to the next little section here. This one is nationalism always gets you to socialism. This is another one that they where I felt there was a contradiction here. Let's keep going here.
The Republican Party is becoming a party of industrial policy and protectionism, right? And this gets me to the part of the thesis of liberal fascism, which is that historically nationalism and socialism are the same thing.
Correct. Yes.
As experienced, right? Rhetorically they can be different, and theoretically they can be different. Yeah. Babeuf is different than Herder or whatever. We can have that conversation if you want, but and the thing I would always use on high school students or college students is, take any speech by Fidel Castro and take the word nationalism and replace it with socialism, or the word socialism and replace it with nationalism. The meanings of the sentences don't change, right? Yeah. Socializing industry is nationalizing industry,
yes, exactly.
And that weird consensus on when you have consensus about economics, it makes the culture war stuff so much more important because you still need to say the other side is the enemy. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you can't do it about economics, what are you going to do it on? Well, you can do it about foreign policy a little bit, but there's kind of a consensus about foreign policy too. I mean, up until Panama Canal craziness. Yeah.
And by the way, let's just say about the Panama Canal. Is there any concept or a thought process here that you believe, and maybe I'm wrong, that Trump wants to take Greenland and the Panama Canal with military? Or is it like a deal that he wants to do? I think there's a difference there, okay? So now, don't focus on nationalism leads to socialism. Therefore, don't think about national issues. You should not be a nationalist by policy because that gets you in the wrong place, okay? That will get you in the wrong place, so make sure we don't have that. Okay, so a little later on, we will talk about, let's talk about foreign policy. Maybe foreign policy, since we shouldn't be interested in national policy. And I'm not saying you're not interested in national policy, but nationalism. And the concept, I think, of nationalism much lately is you have, and by the way, I think Kurt Mills actually with Tucker counters that, his point of view. And you can have, these are opinions, okay, of what you have here. But if you're not focused on, and some of nationalism is America first, right? Let's take what's in our best interest. And if that is, and you say that brings us to socialism eventually, then maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we should be thinking globally. Maybe we should be thinking, globally. Let's see what Moynihan et al. I don't know why the volume's all down in these says about that.
No, look at our history. You've done a lot of bad stuff too. And I was like, wait, what? The Republican nominee for president just, said we're pretty bad on the international stage too. And it's just been a weird thing, particularly.
Let me ask you about this more directly, because I've asked a couple people about this, and I've always gotten different answers. It's sort of fascinating to me because I've seen, you live in NR for 20 years, and there are literally dozens of us, nerds like us, who follow this stuff this granularly. And one of the things that is fascinating is it kind of doesn't matter what the gateway drug is, what the red pill is. When people start these migrations, right, about becoming sort of cranky on economics or cranky on cultural stuff or conspiratorial, right, whatever.
Yeah.
They end up being obsessed with foreign policy.
Yes.
And it doesn't make a lot of logical sense to me. It's like, okay, so all of a sudden you think that liberal democratic capitalism is bad and we need a social welfare state. Why are you talking to me about Israel?
Mm-hmm.
What which by the way has much closer to the economic system that you would like. You know?
Exactly.
What you know, but it's weird. It's like
that's not the economics.
And and the reason why, one, because you kind of brought it up, but two, I was talking with Pod about this yesterday. My colleague Nick Catoggio, he made this argument that I don't necessarily fully subscribe to, but I think it's worth taking seriously. That the reason why Trump is talking about, literally in his inaugural address, about territorial expansion of the United States and taking the Panama Canal, is that is historically where nationalism has to go, right? There's something about notions of greatness and nationalism that has to lead to greatness on the world stage, and the only metric for that is either winning a war or expanding your territory, right? And it feels to me like there's some truth to that. It can also be explained by Trump's Putin envy, right? Oh, you got to do it.
There you go. That's really where we're at. Okay, so look, you can't you focus on nationalism, it leads to socialism. I don't know why they're so obsessed with foreign policy. Okay, so what the fuck is it? What is it? Okay, are those two? Maybe they're not mutually exclusive. I don't know. Which also makes me bring my concern here with Mark Levin. Great idea. Egypt and Jordan should take the Palestinians from Gaza because Trump's talking about moving that. Dude is obsessed with foreign policy, specifically the Middle East, and bombing the shit out of anyone there. Is that who you're talking about now, Jonah? Or is anybody that's has the foreign policy desk at Cato, at Reason, at Mises, or any of these places, when you have foreign, is that your issue? And it's like always Israel. It's because if you can point it to where you have gripes about, and by the way, why shouldn't you understand what's going on in the world? And why shouldn't you have an interest in foreign policy? Because just like politics, if you don't take an interest in them, they will take an interest in you. And it's the best way to protect your country and protect yourself is to understand what the heck is going on. Okay, I think I have another foreign policy item here. Double check this one. Foreign policy 1. Yes, foreign policy 2. Let's see what they say about foreign policy here.
Right. The reason I bring that up is that free market economics. I mean, you're the guy who made the allusion to broken windows earlier. It's funny. You actually made references to both broken windows, both the James Q. Wilson broken window stuff and to Bastiat's broken window. I'm referring to the Bastiat stuff, right? The Bastiat stuff says that all economics boils down to trade-offs, right? Choices, right? And so you can celebrate the money that the window maker is getting from the broken window, but that's taking money that would have been spent for other things, right? It's all Tom Sowell, right? It's you can't spend the same dollar twice. That is really boring and annoying for ideologues who want to live in a zero-sum universe, right? And the beauty of talking about foreign policy is it lends itself to Manichaeanism. It lends itself to good versus evil in all regards. It lends itself to utopianism. And you can have utopianism in economics. It's just that utopianism in economics has been falsified so many frickin' times that it's hard for them to get any traction with it. But you say, once we get rid of the Jews, like that's the way of talking about the sunny uplands of history. And I think it's why people move towards things that are basically literary arguments or theological arguments, because to argue about economics means to acknowledge the crooked timber of humanity, the flawed nature of the metaxy, the flawed nature of human life that says you cannot have your cake and eat it too. And that just messes with the heads of ideologues in a way that, or fanatics, if you want a better term, because I think we're both kind of ideologues. And the other thing is like, and I'm obsessed with this, it's on the bingo card for this podcast, is philosophical and epistemological monism is the great enemy of all serious thinking. If you try to reduce everything down to one thing, you're going to say stupid stuff. So if you're going to
okay, so like, you obsess just over foreign policy and because you're anti-Semitic. Those are the kind of stupid things you're going to say. Okay, so don't boil them down to just one thing. Look, I'm not disagreeing with a lot of the things that these two gentlemen say, and some of it, perfectly fine, goes over my head. I don't mind that. The problem is the straw man scenarios that you've talked about. I don't know who you're referring to, because a lot of it with free markets, libertarians, they keep bringing this kind of mixing the two back in. The reference to Dave Smith early on, and now, as a matter of fact, in this video here, this is 108 in, he had just said previously, because I'm mixing all different timestamps in here, Dave Smith earlier, is obsessed. They never talk about economics. Okay, straw man yourself out. You can say that they never do, and then you get a rip on them for all the reasons why they can't do it, which doesn't make sense because they do talk about these kind of things all the time. We all do. Okay, continuing our way along here. This is an interesting, and I just want to say this. This is what I talk about a lot, which is when you trust someone and they've said something that you believe, perfectly fine. Michael Malice, I just saw him with John Stossel, and he made this point, which is you tell your spouse 10 things, and one of those is a lie, and they know it's a lie. Suddenly, all 10 are in, you don't know whether you're skeptical, about, you don't believe him about all those things. So we've already heard, I don't know who Dave Smith is, and that you do. Okay, you're both lying about these kind of topics and some of the things you're doing, but you know so much about other things. Now I wonder, okay, am I been hoodwinked on some of them? Here's one of them. I don't know if this is it, but this is a easy thing that people do all the time, and it's been happening over and over.
To say that Pat Buchanan had a pretty difficult relationship with the Jews, and that's, for those of you who haven't read this, it was collected in a book called In Search of Antisemitism that William F. Buckley put together, which does deal with a lot of stuff. Joe Sobran, who is, I think, justly forgotten because I'm just not a fan of this, and Pat Buchanan and people like this. And, it was no coincidence that Pat Buchanan went in so hard for John Demjanjuk. It's like, oh, good Lord, what is happening? So I don't think it's surprising when you have, and then the new versions of this martyr maid character, Daryl Cooper, who is just some guy who does podcasts and somehow is, has 500,000 followers and, one of the most successful history podcasts, is making allusions to Holocaust denial and constantly going on about the neocons. And then he's also saying, Churchill's the bad guy in the Second World War, and things happened on the Eastern Front when the Wehrmacht didn't have any facilities for prisoners of war. And it's like, I guess that's how you get Bobby Yar. It's like, we just don't have any housing for these people.
Right.
But like that kind of stuff that has become increasingly popular. I had a conversation with a friend the other day. And again, I won't French goodbye this one. This will just plant a seed for maybe we can do this again. And you can come on the call and talk about this. There is a comedian named Ari Shafir, who I like. He's a funny guy.
Okay, I'm not going to get into that. But basically, he talks about Ari going on Howie Mandel's podcast, who, by the way, just had Bill Burr and Billy Corgan on. They're brothers, half brothers. Blew my mind, and their minds too. Anyway, their dad had 2 families that he didn't know about. It was crazy. Point is, he's going to tell a story about Ari basically going on the show and saying, your Jews are not in trouble. I mean, whatever. And these two kind of dig back and forth on that. Okay. I thought it was interesting. We'll just play a little bit. This is the counter. Now this is Dave Smith and when he had Tucker on.
It's that he's specifically saying that we're bankrupting ourselves. We're destroying our currency. We have de facto open borders, which are changing the makeup of the nation. And, that we fight wars all over the world that are completely unnecessary to fight in. So it's not just that he called the collapse, it's that he specifically laid out the main driving forces for it.
No, it's totally true. And did it in a kind of, I knew Pat well because I worked with him for years. And, he was always being denounced as a hater and hating this group or that group. And in fact, I never smelled that on him. And I've got a pretty keen nose for, sublimated, suppressed rage. I never felt that on him. He was a cheerful guy, and he explained his points in ways that were basically impossible to refute. And that's why they just dismissed him.
Well, he said the thing, because I remember he was always labeled an anti-Semite. And I'm Jewish, and so I remember asking at one point, because I really liked a few of his books. I was like, so where's the anti-Semitic stuff? Because I haven't gotten to any of that. And usually people who hate the Jews are quite happy to tell you that they hate the Jews. It's like they want to tell you. You're like, how's the weather? And they're like, the Jews control the weather. And you're like, all right, I wasn't trying to get into that.
They're making it
rain. Yeah, I wasn't trying to go down that path, but okay. And then the evidence I was shown was that he one time during the initial the first Iraq War, the Persian Gulf War in the 90s, he said nobody wants a war in Iraq other than some weapons companies and the Israel lobby.
Yeah.
And they went, see, he's anti-Semitic. And you're like, but that's just objectively true. These were people who were lobbying for. How is that makes you a hater? But anyway, it's
and we're actually that's exactly right. And by the way, 30 years later, it's like there's kind of no denying that. And you can argue whether it was a good idea or not or whatever. I think there are two sides to every argument.
I don't know. I have not looked into it enough. I just think that that's one answer to the thing. And I will just say, as someone who kind of grew up with this BoomerCon type of influence, Ben Shapiro, Jonah Goldberg was a big, by the way, he's about my age, I think, wrote for National Review when he was pretty young. His mom was Lucianne Goldberg. She was one of the people that had this whole Monica Lewinsky, she was a reporter and she got her and kind of broke this whole story with Bill Clinton and stuff. So, anyway, he has bona fides for that. His dad was kind of the neocon, former lefty that came over and hated the left and that kind of stuff. Jew, all right? But the idea is, especially with the war stuff, you go back to Buchanan, who would make some of these comments, is once again, and I bought into this at the time, which is you shut them down because they're anti-Semitic. They hate the Jews, and because they hate the Jews, you don't have to listen to anything. And you're like, well, I don't know. Israel's a country, right? They try to get it every which way. And Moynihan, and by the way, if he were to watch this, which he's not, or either one of them, they would call me some sort of crackpot. But my problem with them, and they talked about Martyr Made, is you can rip him because he was on a podcast with Tucker where he was just throwing out some ideas, but he's got hours and hours, 30-some hours talking about the Israel-Palestine issue, 1948 up to 1948. I played a bunch of this. I did a whole breakdown. I did a 30-minute video of them, as a matter of fact, and I think we're going to talk about it a little bit here. Okay, so I want to go back to here. They're going to talk about Martyr Made, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it's also
particularly when you're seeing a lot of kind of Holocaust denial and people referencing Holocaust deniers subtly. I'm not going to say that that's exactly what Tucker Carlson is saying when he's interviewing this Martyr Made guy, but when he says, in Austria.
By the way, this is borderline actionable. Okay, I did this, and Daryl Cooper's not going to do anything about it. Because he doesn't give a shit, I imagine. And after he went on Tucker and he did all this stuff, this is the kind of shit people were saying. Keep going.
Yeah, you can get thrown in jail for just having different. Like, who got thrown in jail in Austria for having different opinions? David Irving. And I know someone told me that he has mentioned David Irving. Like, that stuff is being mainstreamed at the same time as it's being minimized.
For listeners who don't know, David Irving is like the dean of historical pro-Nazi Holocaust denier revisionist types, right?
And he is just objectively pro-Nazi. I don't think he would even deny that. I mean, he's apparently, by the way, on death's door, which I'm not going to lament when that news comes. But no, I think to your point, though, is that having to explain.
Okay, what I want to say there is Daryl Cooper goes on there and says, in Austria, just to talk, if you have pushback and you have different opinions about World War II, you can be put in jail. And they're like, yeah, David Irving, who's a Holocaust denier. And it's like, okay, I don't know what you think you're getting out of this comment. And by the way, he's not the only one. There's other people. And by the way, are you saying you should be put in jail for wrong speech, for not believing everything, right? I mean, I believe the Holocaust happened. Dale Cooper, we walked through some of his stuff. I did a bunch of videos on those kind of things, playing clip after clip after clip of him talking about the horrors of the Eastern Front, the stuff in Russia, just over and over and over. It's not, and he takes things at face value. He takes all of these atrocities at face value doing his podcast. There's nothing in there he does where he says, well, they're claiming, these people were killed and shot. They were claiming that 30,000 people were put in a pit and it took them 6-7 days to slaughter everybody. They're claiming this happened. No, he's saying this happened. Here's a diary of someone, and he reads their statements at the time. So to say these kind of absurd things you got here with in Austria he said this happened, and it was David Irving. Okay. Someone still got jailed for wrong speech. Is that the takedown you thought it was going to be? Should that happen? What if we're in America and we decide, hey, we're going to start saying things about you can't talk about Trump derangement or whatever, TD. See, it's even on his podcast here. It says TD, Trump derangement. And if you have Trump derangement, we're going to throw you in jail. You'd be like, no, that's free speech. I can do that. But are you saying that it's okay to have that kind of stuff in other countries? I mean, it's just stupid. It's one of the dumbest comments I think I've heard from someone. Okay. Okay, Merle, let's keep going to Daryl.
For John Demjanjuk. It's like, oh, good Lord, what is happening? So I don't think it's surprising when you have, and then the new versions of this Martyr Made character, Daryl Cooper, who is just some guy who does podcasts and somehow is, has 500,000 followers and, one of the most successful history podcasts, is making allusions to Holocaust denial and constantly going on about the neocons. And then he's also saying, well, Churchill's the bad guy in the Second World War, and things happened on the Eastern Front.
Okay, we did play that one. Good for us. So I'm not going to play this clip here, but I did a podcast, like I said. This is
real fathers and brothers being killed in those dozens of towns and hundreds of villages.
He goes on and on for that. As a matter of fact, this was one podcast that I took a clip of, which was 6 hours. Here's another. Why is he not pushing back on a lot of this fake stuff that happened? All right, that's just me pontificating. You go fuck yourself, Tyler, and watch that. Okay, let's go into the next one. So this is where he mentions another person that he doesn't know much about.
This guy that I saw, his name's Scott Horton. I don't know anything about him, but he's this anti-war.com. He's a libertarian-ish guy.
Okay. I don't know anything about, by the way, I just listened today. I went on a ride. I listened to the Fifth Column podcast. I absolutely love Michael Moynihan a lot. Okay. And I could disagree, but you can't pull this kind of shit. I don't, and by the way, I believe, because I know Michael Moynihan just recently, he was doing debates, live debates, auditorium, defending Israel, right? They have the thing, is this a genocide? And he thinks those people that say that this was wacky. He also thinks people that and you're going to talk about here a little bit, he's really been into, Russia's perfectly fine. I mean, they're the bad guy, Ukraine is just glorious and whatnot. And I'm reading into this and over accentuating. But you can't go, if you guys have heard any of this gentleman is no dummy. He astounds me at his ability to recall names, dates, just over and over and over. I don't know who Dave Smith is. Scott Horton, I don't know anything about him. He works at antiwar.com. He's some sort of libertarian. Okay, you knew two big things about him. Okay.
But he wrote a book about Ukraine, and what is the name of the book? Provoked. Provoked. It's the name of the book. It's just like
Okay, did you get past the name of the book? That is nice, but it's like me feeling that I'm educated because I went to Drudge Report and I read all the headlines. I just read the headlines. I don't need to know. And by the way, I do that quite a bit. Anyway.
We did it. It was us. Even in Ukraine, the color revolutions, we are destabilizing people. No one else is ever doing this. And, Putin and Transnistria, they don't care about that or something. But
no one has ever done this. Is bullshit. And I love you, Michael Moynihan, but I can't let this go. You've got to be better than this. You are. And by the way, he talks about this, and I would encourage you to listen to an hour and 30 minutes with this interview. He talks about breaking down Rachel, and he's so good on very many topics. Okay. He's very, very good. Okay. He talks about Rachel Maddow podcast. And he goes a deep dive. He's one of those kind of people, but you can't do a deep enough dive to rip on someone. And by the way, I would just say maybe your initial inclination is just wrong a lot.
It is this kind of envy, I think, with Trump, who's like, yeah, they do it and they get away with it. Why? And it's actually a fair question in the sense that these people are never worked up about the sort of territorial desires of Putin of trying to reassemble a Russian empire, not in a Soviet way as such, but kind of Soviet in its way. Like the argument that you get from Chomsky and, Glenn Greenwald, who's been on our podcast a bunch of times and who I like personally, by the way, and I think he's a very, very bright guy. I just disagree with him on a lot. He did the same thing that Chomsky used to do. I don't care about that stuff because it's not my government. Mm-hmm. It's not my taxpayer dollars, which I think is an incredible dodge, and you find times when they do care, but Israel, we're giving them, it's like, I used to say this about Israel all the time is, our taxpayer dollars are funding that. That's why we're on the streets. That's why we don't care about Syria as such. Look, I lived in Sweden for a number of years and I've never met I've seen a culture that is so obsessed with a country so far away and has so little, there's like 17,000 Jews in Sweden and they don't give any money. But they are out there on the streets every time Israel does something. There's something else motivating this. And what? Okay, there's a few. I could give some pushback for this, which is the world seems to revolve. Is it around the sun? No, it's around Israel. There is, and with America being kind of being puppeted, is it dog, wag the tail type of thing? We react to a lot of stuff that happens. I mean, these two guys are indicative of it here, which is you don't agree with us, you're anti-Semitic. It's you can literally want to be okay with David Irving being in jail if you don't agree with this mentality that is pervasive. So perhaps Sweden's like, look,
We don't like what's going on over there. We're not a fan of that because when it does happen over there, it doesn't stay over there. It goes everywhere. It goes to the Middle East, which then hates America. Then they come to the New York and they blow down buildings. And perhaps it's our interactions over there and our consistent desire to be so involved that it makes a difference even in fucking Sweden. Or maybe they are anti-Semitic. I don't know. Maybe so. And are you saying, and you can be both. You can also be anti-Semitic and be right. Okay. You can, whether you want to, just outright Jew hatred or what, you can say, I don't think we should be involved in X, Y, and Z. And you can actually be right about that. Right. I don't know that Jonah Goldberg was so right about being involved in the Iraq war.
That is it anti-Semitism? I think a lot of times it is. But I think there's other stuff too, it's a puppet of the United States. It's just kind of this anti-US argument again. Why those people have gone that far? It's like, look, one of the things I don't understand either, and we have a lot of mutual friends here, and there's a lot of people I respect, but I see a lot of people like at the Bulwark, for instance, that don't like Donald Trump and are rightfully outraged by, especially like, I haven't looked, but I'm sure they're outraged, and they absolutely should be, about this Jan 6 pardons. It's like it's a disgrace. And I'm glad that there's some Republicans coming out and saying this. Don't pretend to love the police when you're saying to everybody. Even J.D. Vance said, no, we wouldn't do that.
Right.
But like,
I got to pause this because this is fascinating to me. Paul says, I've lost a lot of respect for him. I imagine you're talking about Moynihan because over the last couple of years, because he talks crap about Dave on the Fifth Column. Makes it even more disingenuous that he acts like he doesn't know who he is. Exactly right. Thank you for confirming that because I listen to the Fifth Column podcast a lot. It comes and goes, but I would say possibly hundreds of hours of Moynihan et al. Because I started with episode 1. This is what got me in this space was this podcast. It started with me finding Malice and some of these others, and then Malice was on Thaddeus Russell, and then I listened to Thaddeus, and he had Camille Foster, and then I found Camille Foster, boom, the Fifth Column, and then boom, it was right before the 2016 election, and then I listened to these guys a ton, and then I went from basically Jonah Goldberg style, kind of like Michael Moynihan to Matt Welsh to Camille Foster. Those are the 3 hosts there. Camille's like an anarchist. And so I went through this process, and thank you for confirming that, which is, they fully know who this people. This is what's frustrating. This is what's frustrating about it. Oh yeah, let's keep going here because this is where he's very, very good, right? And he talks right here about.
I've seen it take over the brains of so many people that they stop even caring about conservatism as such. They're not really making arguments. It's just been completely overwhelmed by a friend who I like. And
I want to make one more comment before I totally forget this, which is because I was listening to their show today, and he talks about doing an interview with who's the AI guy, Sam Altman. Talked about doing an interview with Altman, and he goes, "This guy was the biggest dick. He's a complete dick." Now, this is what I love about Moynihan, which is he gives the back story of some of these interviews because he's interviewed a lot of, big people over the years with Vice and whatnot. So he's like, this guy's a complete dick, but it doesn't mean that, he's wrong about the stuff he says. Now, earlier, I played a clip where they're talking about William F. Buckley being the villain of the 20th century. And I cut that part out for the video, but it was him saying, I've met him. He was the nicest man. He was amazing. He was so... That doesn't mean anything. I tell clients this all the time. You can be, I want, for custody or whatnot. And they're going to go to court. We're going to go to trial. And they're like, I want this character witness to come say that I would never have hit my wife. Okay, well, how do you know this person? Well, I see them at work every day. Have they ever seen you and your wife together? No. Well, then how would they know? First of all, they're not in your house. You could be a wonderful person and be a serial killer, okay? So my point is, and then his thing with Sam Altman, he makes the comment of, oh, he's a dick. It doesn't mean that he's not right about his situation or whatnot. Well, okay, William F. Buckley could have been the nicest guy ever. You would love to, hang out with him. It doesn't mean that what he put in place, his CIA connections, and the policies that he really was able to influence weren't villainous, right? That doesn't happen. Anyway, let's keep going.
Right over there, I saw him post something on Facebook, I think. And it was, I think was it Jimmy Carter or somebody died. And they said, yeah, okay, fine. But the problem was he didn't come out against Trump hard enough. And this is actually, maybe it wasn't Jimmy Carter, it was somebody. Yeah, it was fine, but I really wish they would. And that kind of obsession, I think, is what happens to these people in the libertarian right, et cetera. They get this thing in foreign policy, and they go all in on it, and to at the expense of everything else. I mean, I don't know how you can be a libertarian and never talk about economics. I mean, Matt and I talk about this all the time. We're counting these people. Have you ever heard them say anything about tariffs, about Trump? And also,
yes, all the time. I was just listening to Bob Murphy. Who are the libertarians you're listening to? Michael Moynihan. Who are the libertarians you're listening to?
Now, Trump is being the imperialist expansionist that you supposedly hate. Well, let's take Greenland. We should have that. It's ours. It's good for us. Why is it good for Denmark? Let's go back to the debates between Buckley and Reagan about the Panama Canal, and we should just we built it, and everyone died there. It was American, which is actually not true. But that kind of argument is they seem to not have that ideological core that, makes them associate with either a party or an ideology.
Who are you talking about? I wish you would not just blanket statement. One, you mentioned the only libertarians you've mentioned in this podcast were Scott Horton, who does talk about economics, Scott Horton and Dave Smith, but a comedian, so we know it's Dave Smith. Who are you referencing that doesn't want to talk about economics? Those two are Austrian economics guys.
Watching these people be deranged by this, and I do think that there's people that we like and we know, and I don't mean to say the Bulwark. There's a lot of good people over there, a lot of people I like.
I get it. Yeah,
but you know what I mean. It's like a shorthand at this point.
Sure.
A bunch of pieces of shit over there. Let's be serious about this. Okay, so I want to talk about this one. This is okay. They get some things right. I'm gonna play a clip here where they do get some things right.
I think he's a very smart guy. Listen to that interview with Curtis Yarvin for the
I haven't
New York
listened
Times.
to that. I don't. but he's an interesting one.
Well, I gotta say, I'd be curious what you think about it, because I think I might write about it today. I found it so unbelievably facile and sophomoric, and so unimpressive. There are a lot of impressive people who are impressed by that guy. Was so unimpressed. And partly because I know some of this stuff really well, right? So he's making this case. He's trying. Here's how I convinced liberals that monarchy is good. And he goes on about how FDR was basically a dictator. I was like, well, I know that stuff chapter and verse, right? And the reason I pointed that out was to say that wasn't good.
Yeah.
And he wants to make the case that FDR ran things great.
Yes.
And my argument is no, he made the Great Depression. He made the Depression,
Twice.
the Great Depression.
Second Depression.
And he became president for life and all these sorts of things. And but anyway, the Adrian Vermeule universe. There are serious people and there are crackpots. And there's everybody in between in that sort of world of anti-liberalism or post-liberalism and all that. But none of their ideas are new.
Yeah.
And none of their ideas are particularly distinct from other anti-liberal. I think Marxists were the first post-liberals, right? And
by the way, can we just talk about behind him? You're going to do what you think is a big show, right? Straighten a fucking poster, straighten a picture, maybe clean up your fucking desk or just move your mic. This is a cardio mic? I don't know, dynamic. It needs to be hit from the front. Look how Moynihan at least talks into you're just fucking talking into the side of your mic here, a dumb fuck. Okay, so he talks about Curtis Yarvin. I completely agree with him on that. But what I thought I would do, because I have a clip here of Yarvin on Michael Malice debating Dave Smith. He talks about FDR, and at the time I heard it, I thought it was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And let's go just what he said here. Let's go.
And of course, anyone who's an American progressive, and honestly, most American conservatives really revere FDR. So when you say America needs a new FDR, you're sounding, I think, a little less controversial.
Okay, so I may have added the burp in there, by the way, but that's one of the dumbest things I've heard. I grew up, no one that I knew in conservative, which is how I grew up, in conservative circles ever had any reverence for FDR. Go fuck yourself. That's just not what happened. The concept was always, at least that I knew, that's just what Jonah said, which is he prolonged. I subscribed to National Review. Spectator magazine, all of these things. No one was talking about him as anything reverence. There was none of that. Okay, so Curtis Yarvin, go fuck yourself. So they nailed that one completely right. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, last clip we're gonna play here is what I would say is you don't understand even your anti-Semitism. You use it as a cudgel, but you don't understand what you're actually saying, because what you're actually saying could be used against you. Let's go. Here and there.
But the whole thing about an attention-driven economy, right, is driving engagement. And one of the last things that gets people worked up are like racism, pro and con.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and all that.
Pro and con. Let's use that, because ADL, you guys, when I say you guys, I mean these two here are using it tonight too.
Kind of stuff. It's a way to get eyeballs and feel like you're saying something important, right? I don't think it's just pure engagement whoring. Yeah. I think that like people want to feel it's a status thing, feel like they're being attacked for courage and people want to be transgressive. And in a society where everything is permitted, it's harder and harder to find good candidates to be transgressive.
Well, it's not permitted in Austria.
Right? You can't just walk your lobster in the park in 1890s Paris the way you used to be able to shock the bourgeoisie. And
my pal, and I'm sure you're friends with him too, my pal Abe Greenwald said the other day about the Elon Musk Hitler salute. And kind of shocked his fellow panelists on the Commentary Podcast. I think there's something to this. I mean, you can't prove that.
Okay, they both somewhat defend Elon Musk on this. But I just would say there, what he doesn't understand is, and maybe he does, which is, you do all this thing, you think you're edgy, because you're a little anti-Semitic. You know what? What about using it from the other side, right? You talk about the pros and cons of racism, but it goes the same way. Victims, ADL makes their living off of victimhood, okay? And the more you progress and you think that you have there was a swastika at my school. And it's like, okay, was there? It's like all these things that you make a big issue about. So it goes both ways. And I think they've done a good job on this podcast of going both ways on this topic, which, like I said, I think the whole concept here, I don't know if it's some jealousy of Dave Smith or not, but the whole concept here is to actually go, let's not pretend that we actually know who he is. And since we don't actually know who he is, then we don't actually have to listen to anything he says. Matter of fact, we're going to make up stuff all along the way. Now, let me get to some comments here. I think we could do it this way. No, I want to do a pop out. Why is it not showing me? There we go. We can at least take a look here, a little bit of the comments, and then I think we'll be done on this whole situation. And because I want to go watch some football. I want to go see. Hopefully, the Bills beat the Chiefs because I hate the Chiefs. Okay, so let's go here up further. You said not pro-Semitic. Okay, not gonna lie. Never heard of Michael Moynihan before. And look, what can I say? I'm a fan, and yet I'm just critiquing him in this one, because you can't be this expert and then suddenly not know what the fuck you're talking about. And I don't know why you have this issue. It's just shit going on with Dave Smith. It seems very odd, and it doesn't do you well. When people like me who know a lot about you are able to point this out, it just doesn't work. I'm sure a lot of people did. It's not called intelligence. It's called deception. I think that's what you're talking about with Jonah Goldberg, actually. There are two boomers trying to convince us that a spade is not a spade, similar to how two Jews are attempting to convince us that they are not subversive to their host's culture. Okay. I know the tone of voice and I know the facial expressions when I hear the vernacular of this tone of voice coming from these boomers. Now, I don't know if they're technically boomers. Okay. That's from Cocktail Hour. I don't know that they're boomers. Gen X. I don't know. What generation am I? Because they're the same kind of age, close to 50, whatever that is. I don't think that's boomer. Levin is peak boomer. Yeah, he is, though, actually. Hubbleson said, guy looks like the guy from Office Space Stapler guy. Yes. Ashkenazi Jews are not Semites. Okay. This guy looks like Robin Williams. Dave Smith, ? From Hubbleson. Actually, pretty good joke there. Yeah, okay. Look, I'm going to tell you, the Fifth Column podcast is very good. And I find Michael Moynihan very funny. He's very, very quick. This is my problem. That he is very quick and he's very smart. So why are you acting this way about Dave Smith? It's just so stupid. And by the way, you're like, okay, you're white knighting for Dave. You know what my problem is? This is maybe why I'm upset. Is because I think I know a lot, which is Dave Smith is a show I listen to a lot religiously. I have over the years, all his episodes basically. I've been doing a podcast review of his show like way back in. So I know what he talks about in the economics part. When I listen to him, I'm very impressed. Okay, very impressed with his ability to go on economics, right? He can talk to anybody at the Mises Institute about economics and do absolutely fine. And even Robbie Bernstein is able to do that as well. So when I hear that, and then I see someone like Moynihan, who I admire for his ability to do takedowns and to know what he's talking about and have a lot of information and kind of these surgical type of ways of going about, journalists and just pieces of shit. Then I see this and I'm like, oh, dude, you disappoint me. You disappoint me because one, you could just not even bring these people up because you don't know what you're talking about. Or are you trying to be deceptive? And now I'm concerned that he was being deceptive because it's just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. David Irving is amazing. Love that guy. Okay. These two wheelers are just jealous. Imagine having the balls to be a revisionist. They've talked about Scott Horton on TFC before. Okay. Horton here's a Jew. Sounds like Reddit. Okay. You got Reddit and said, I'm done hearing from the chosen people on anything. Okay. There's a lot of Jew hatred going on in this chat. That makes me wonder where what I've accumulated here. That's like reading the title. Hubbleson said, that's like reading the title of Mein Kampf and going, oh, this was clearly written by a black lesbian or something. My struggle, LOL. Okay. Okay, I already read that one by Paul. I saw a burn on the side of the street once. Don't know him at all. I think I'll dedicate like 50 podcasts to talking about him. Okay. Oh, a bum. Sorry. What do they do have in common? Okay. I'm day one listener of the Fifth Column podcast, says Paul, because of their show, The Independents on Fox Business, turned me into lesbianism, but libertarianism. I stopped being a paid subscriber because I was tired of the Dave trashing. Ben Stein's son. Okay. I don't know who Ben Stein's son is. I know who Ben Stein is. By the way, he worked for, Ben Stein his dad was a very famous economist, and Ben Stein was an economist. I know he was on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he did some TV, and then Win Ben Stein's Money with Jimmy Kimmel, I believe. But Ben Stein worked in the Nixon administration, and there's a video out there. I'm trying to remember where I saw this, which is when he talks about when Nixon was, leaving the White House and he had resigned and how he was just all in tears about it. So Ben Stein, he got his bona fides from, and then he wrote for like Spectator magazine and whatnot. So what did they have in common? Ben Stein's son. National Review has been instrumental in containment in conservatism. Yeah, they've really disappointed me. That's certainly not jealousy. Okay. Boomers are in their 70s and 80s. Yeah, these guys are Gen X. Okay, I think that's true. They have a boomer mindset, says Reddit, and I believe you're right. Maybe it's just the mindset of old people noticing not to hate. Curtis Yarvin. I don't know what you meant to say, but I don't want to hear about those dancing Israelis, says Def. Okay, well, there you go. So last thing I'll say is I've fallen into this problem. Someone pointed it out to me before, which is I took on Vivek and his H-1B thing, going after Zach, Saved by the Bell, and Zach and Slater, and saying you should have venerated Screech instead. And I'm like, this is your typical nerd, I playing the violent. Now, someone pointed out that he almost went pro in tennis. Okay. So maybe he is an athlete. I just still, you can get things wrong, right? And sometimes that's what we do. We just pontificate here. I have standards. And by the way, this isn't my job. These guys make money. These guys, Jonah Goldberg and Michael Moynihan, they make money doing what they're doing here. And this is their form of, I hold them to a much different standard than I do perhaps even myself, which is just a little bit different, which is, I bloviate. And do that. So anyway, Martyr Maid, the comments about Martyr Maid, even Tucker about, Holocaust stuff, go listen to their things, right? You heard them on Tucker. Okay, fine. But then you're like, oh, this is what I would have thought, which is like, oh, Martyr made those comments. Oh yeah, he's an anti-Semite. He really likes David Irving and whatnot. I'm gonna go listen to his podcast and find out. And then you listen to it and you go like, maybe I can't go there. But maybe you listen to Dave Smith podcast just once, and listen, and maybe you can hear if he talks about economics or not. I will say Dave has morphed over the last bit, and economics. When economic issues come up, you definitely talk about them. I think economics are involved in everything. That's decisions for everything. I know Pete Quinones has kind of changed. He's like, "Fuck you with economics." We need to talk about that. I still think it's important. It's how things get done, and I think it's also there. Vivek is also scum drunk company, so yeah, really not beating the Indian scam trope. Okay, I appreciate everybody coming in here on a Sunday. It's 4:11 p.m. West Coast. I'm gonna go watch some football. Vivek, Ohio's problem now. Yeah, thanks Magoo for joining us. It's good to push back on people, and I enjoyed kind of getting a breakdown back into my old self of doing a podcast review, playing clips, making comments. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it. We will see you next time. Podcast review, LPR on Rumble. Go find us there. Go find me on Substack. Go find me on Twitter. Click like. Enjoy. Thanks for the show. You too, Red Ensign. Have a good evening, everybody. Go Sports, Tower Gang NPC. All of you, love you. Out.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
I think Tyler is amazing.
And I'm a fan of this show. I've watched several episodes.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. You stink, Tyler.
Never promise crazy a baby.
Oh, I like that. That's a cool idea.
Are either of you homosexuals?
I go both ways. What do you think?
You mean like flaming or?
No, we're not homosexual, but we are willing to learn.
But I do wonder for others in other cases whether libertarianism today is just an excuse for many on the right to act selfishly.
Look at me. And then some fat asses in Washington started having opinions. The Olympic Committee started having opinions. You bitch, I know you. You started writing your opinions.
And it just makes me wonder, you're dead, bitch. Why are you doing this to this poor guy?
I don't care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the